everyone, welcome back to Drybonesgarage Garage. This video is going to be part of a mini-series where I summarize what my dad and I have done with the hot rod Corvair that we have. In the last episode I discussed what we did for the deck lid and the hood. I briefly went over our plans for the HVAC, but never talked about how we finished it. So I'll cover that in this episode, as well as some other things. As you already know, we made the Corvair into a front-engine car, which meant we had plenty of space to work with in the back for our trunk. To do that, Dad cut both the wheel wells out of the way, while I took one of the Cutlass wheel wells and split it in half to be used as a potential space for a spare tire, though in the end it was never used. We then cut the stanchions down to the height of the floor we thought we wanted. After screwing them back in, I took the pieces Dad cut out and cleaned them up a bit. I then cut the extension we were going to use on the curb side to fill the gap for the trunk cavity and cleaned that up as well. There was a lot of cutting and welding going on back then. Most of what we did was fabricating for the first year we had the car. Anyways, while I did that, Dad made some cross-member extensions to meet the frame. He then cut the frame horns down to make room for the body and welded in the backbone for a support structure. I then made a template for the trunk floor. I got to use the Pythagorean theorem in real life. A few weeks before that, Dad decided to start on another project by prepping the rear quarter of the car for bodywork. He made a patch for the rain channel while I trimmed the cardboard down because it was too big. Once he finished that, Dad helped me trim the template even further. I then moved on to cutting a template for the trunk side facing the bulkhead. Next, Dad had made into metal what I had cut out. One of the things I really like about this car is that the trunk bottom was actually made from the remains of an old washing machine. I just think that's really cool and resourceful. I've heard that the metal used to make them isn't of the best quality, but we're not planning to run the car in bad weather. Later on, Dad cut a notch into a metal block to be used to bend flanges into the sides of the floor. He then taught me how to use it.
Not so much, kiddo. Not so much. Just a couple of degrees at a crack. Get it all the way in there. Like so. Okay.
It took a little more strength than I expected to actually bend the metal. Dad then transferred the tank mounts to the trunk floor and braced it to keep it in place. Next, I separated the G-body floor from the tank mounts by grinding out the spot welds. Then I got some more welding practice by fusing the mounts into the new floor. After trimming the edges a little more, Dad eventually managed to weld it all into the trunk. We took a break from that project for a little while and started to work on creating a fiberglass HVAC for the car, using the Monza one we had as a guide. A few months beforehand, we noticed that the Monza HVAC was too big to fit into the Corvair, but it had some nice shapes we wanted to emulate in the fiberglass one. Dad began to make a box for the HVAC by creating a glass mold of the firewall. It would make it easier to bolt the box to the firewall in the future. When the mold dried, we cut some excess off, and then created a flat sheet to be used for our interface in the bottom of the ductwork. He cut the interface piece out and clamped it to the firewall mold, and then drilled some holes into them for the bolts to go through. Next, we tried to fuse the two pieces together. I went a little ham on the stage and ended up pushing too much glass in between the pieces.
Oh my gosh. That's looking hideous. Let's see. You're jamming the crap out of that.
We also made a glass mold of the Monza squirrel cage, but we didn't smear enough wax on the metal, so we had a really hard time separating the glass. I didn't trust myself to use power tools on this part without wrecking it, so Dad used them instead and freed the piece. We then smoothed the edges of the box and added more glass for support. Dad cut a relief for the heating lines and made another hole for the heater core. Around here, we briefly switched focus to the back of the car again and continued to make and weld in more patches for the rear quarter and the rain channel. I remember having a lot of fun with Dad while helping him out with this.
Can you rotate that metal, or do we need to bend it a little more?
Bend it. Then we continued to work on the HVAC. Dad created some more glass parts for the inside of the heater box and drilled holes in the squirrel cage to fit the blower motor. He sanded it down and created a piece from another part of the Monza box. Next, he made some room in the firewall for the heating lines and the heater core. After sanding the box some more, he widened the heater core hole and prepared to seal every part together. In order to get deep into the nooks and crevices, Dad tried using silica to thicken the epoxy up. I really liked the texture of it. It was super light and fluffy. Anyways, Dad thought he added too much hardener into the mix, so he was a little hasty in spreading it around. Despite that, he said that there was no spillover once everything dried. Then I decided to make a fiberglass curve shape to improve airflow through the piece. But instead of Dad mixing the epoxy, I tried it for the first time, and ended up not stirring the mixture thoroughly enough.
Wasn't expecting you to jump in like that on this.
I have nothing else to do. So it took a while for it to dry. During that period, Dad made some smaller pieces for the inside of the box and refined its shape some more. He moved the scroll cage so it wouldn't interfere with the air ducting and drilled some holes to bolt everything together.
There it is.
We then cut out the last side of the box and cleaned it up. I also remember we had to sand the edge of the box down because the side piece wasn't fitting real well on top of it. When that was finished, Dad bonded the two pieces together, closing everything up. He sanded some of the rough edges away, painted it, and cut another relief in the firewall. Dad then put some foam tape in between the squirrel cage and the housing. So this is gonna help with the interference problem?
No, this is twofold. This keeps air from blowing out here, and the additional space should have the effect of removing, I shouldn't say removing, but giving us a little bit of clearance on the other side where we're right now awfully tight.
He then screwed the blower motor on and bolted the HVAC to the firewall. We didn't do too much more with it after that, at least not on camera. So do you all remember what I said earlier in the video about the rear quarter of the car being bodyworked? Well, we came back to that project a few months later in order to finish it up. Inspired by another YouTube channel, Make It Custom, we used an old file we found in the middle of our yard as a base to make a slapper out of. Dad shaved down the surface of it and bent part of it with a blowtorch to be used as a handle. I think it's so funny that he so happened to do this during the coldest day of our 3-year stay in Michigan so far. It was -7 degrees Fahrenheit that day. I say this because he tempered the tool by chucking it out the door into a snowbank.
Now, as you can see, it's retempered.
That's not bad.
He later tempered it properly in oil. After narrowing the handle, he continued to smooth out and sand out the sides and eventually polished the piece. Once that was finished, Dad took a shrinking disc to the car and went to town, using a marker to indicate where the high and low spots were. That wasn't the only reason he used the marker though.
Apparently, if you use magic marker on that acts as a lubricant, so you don't get the spalling and galling in that wheel when it's rubbing up against the sheet metal.
He then gave me a shot to bodywork the rear quarter of the car. I didn't feel like I was doing a lot though, despite all my banging. I don't know if I'm making any difference, and if I'm making a difference, I don't know if it's good.
No, you gotta keep trying, kiddo. Keep observing.
We then worked on some other projects for a bit. While Dad installed the clutch master cylinder, I made a patch to repair a rusty part of the rain channel. For me, it certainly wasn't an easy piece to make, but I ended up learning a neat trick.
Scribe that.
What?
Pointy end goes into the other man. Scribe. Okay, something pointy. Put that tucked in there.
After that, Dad continued to bodywork the rear quarter, and we welded up the remaining holes. Ready?
Yep. At least I think I am.
We then switched over to the rain channel to work with our previous patch until it was well integrated into the rest of the body. With the help of my sister, we patched up another hole in the area.
Ow.
Are you okay?
Ooh. Yep, hot metal. Can I eat the mic?
No, you may not eat the mic. Then my dad and I welded in the trunk floor extensions. We also fabricated and primed some walls for the trunk. He spread the outsides of them with an undercoat before we welded them in. I remember having a lot of fun talking with Dad during this time.
You put that in a bad spot, kiddo.
Sorry.
You goof.
It was also fun welding everything into place.
Oops. Sorry.
That's fine. I then attempted to weld the top of the trunk sides to the rest of the car. I really don't like this. This part scared me because I thought I'd have to weld upside down with the hot sparks falling on me, but he showed me a different way to do it that didn't require me to be directly underneath it. And he ended up doing it anyway after I left to take care of a quick errand. So.
Okay, that should work for now.
My dad had to go on a work trip to Germany for a couple weeks, so my sister came out to help me seal up a particular section. He cut out a patch for us, so all we had to do was refine its shape and weld it in.
You want to try welding? Michael doesn't like me. I will hold Michael. That's what I'm naming it.
I had a lot of fun with Aaron welding this in, but due to some miscommunication with my dad and my ignorance, the piece didn't turn out very well in the end. I remember working hard on it though and feeling good that we even managed to weld it in the first place without Dad present. Before his arrival, I cleaned up a lot of the welds around the trunk sides. I also filled in a lot of peepholes I found in the trunk by propping a light outside facing it and blacking out a lot of the shop. I spent hours just hunting all of them down. It was a fun memory because I got the chance to play some of my own music on the speakers too.
There's some holes even in the last patch we did. If you can see the light kind of peeking through a little bit. Whoa.
When Dad came back, we welded and seam sealed everything shut, and then we vacuumed the trunk and put it in primer. In a few months we'd spray it with some paint as an extra precaution against rust, but we'll cover that in another summary episode. Then we started to look at how the engine would be cooled down, and decided to use a factory G-body styled radiator. To start out, we whittled down the frame extensions, sliver by sliver, so that the radiator would be able to fit inside the car. Modifications also had to be made to the rad mount so that it would fit in the slot as well. I cleaned up all the sides of the mount and the edges we cut into the extensions. We then put the radiator in its mount to see how it would fit.
That's about where it belongs. It's tight. Actually, it's beyond tight. It's kissing. So we're gonna have to look at that. We're gonna have to do some modification to this. We don't have to worry about transcooler lines. Yeah, that's where that's gonna sit. We're very close to it.
In order to move the radiator forward inside the core support, we got to work modifying the bottom of the mount.
Is that going to be welded shut
Yeah.
with your hammering?
Yeah, we're gonna weld all this shut. We're gonna cut this corner loose, flush it out to the body, to the outer body of this thing, and then we'll plate that over. Then we'll move the holes for the rad mounts. I think they're these. We'll bring them about 1 inch to 1.5 inches forward, and then just let the radiator lay back a little bit. Weld those shut. We should be able to clean that up a little better.
After welding everything down, Dad doctored up the piece some more. Then I took over what he was doing and created more patches to seal up the core support. He jumped in from time to time to help me out with it. I remember having to stretch myself and my fabrication knowledge to finish this. Speaking of that, I think my skills improved a bit because quite a few people let us know how well I was doing around here in the video's comment section. So thank you guys for that. I wasn't expecting the praise. A month later, we had a discussion about the radiator again. At first we were going to weld the core support into the car, but after some time to think about it, we decided to bolt it in instead.
Original plan got trucked out the window, which was going to be kind of a hot rod style small square radiator, just to make it so if this thing did break down on the side of the road, we could go to any parts store and have at least an honest shot at getting the part we needed to get the thing back up and running and on the road. We're trying to use as many, generally speaking, factory pieces as we can. Because of the constrained space in the engine compartment and the decision to use the G-body core support, we're kind of running into a little bit of, I guess, clearance issues as far as pulling this engine. I'm very concerned that we can't or won't be able to just lift the engine out of here without issues against the firewall or that core support if it's permanently mounted. So instead of having it be part of the structure, we're going to create structure and then make that a slot in or bolt in part.
I then trimmed the edges of the frame extension some more and tried to create templates to box everything in. I wasn't getting anywhere with it though because I was overthinking it. At least that's what I believe was happening looking back. Dad ended up creating something that looked completely different to what I cut out. I then cleaned inside the extensions with a wire wheel, and Dad drilled some holes to bolt the core support into. Later on, I welded all the extensions shut, burning some Bondo in the process. We eventually did more with this, but a lot of it spread out little by little in future episodes, so I'll cover that next time around when I have more time. Well, that just about concludes another video, and another year of working on the car and creating videos for you guys. Thank you all so much for sticking around, both regular and new watchers. We couldn't do what we do without you, and you make our day with your comments. I wish you all a wonderful new year, and I'll see you in 2025.
Bye.
Have a good one.